good evening everybody. Welcome to Rubix, and today we've got something very interesting for all you people out there, especially to all the ICMP educational followers and all the people at the universities, and also our network of people at Facebook and YouTube. So today is an interesting day that we've got the Joe Wicks of drumming history on cymbals and on shells. So it's not really a history, I might take that back, but it's more about the autonomy of drums and cymbals. And today, we're doing this for you guys out there, not a marketing tool in any way for Rubix or for the brands that you shall see today. This is for you guys to decide by yourselves to identify what instruments and what qualifies for you. And the most important features that you need to take away from this is use your ears, because your ears are the ones that are going to decide whether or not what instruments you are going to choose. Not your eyes, your ears. Of course, the looks is more important sometimes. But anyway, welcome to Rubix. This is our new facility here in North Acton, and it's open for yourselves to come in anytime, and our doors are open for any kind of services and needs and questions. But today we're doing, with the partnership with ICMP, an autonomy lesson on what cymbals are and what drum shells are and how they make the sound that they do today. So I'm doing this for you guys out there, and so I would like your participation in this event. So questions are really important, and there'll be lots of giveaways as well in the due course of this course. So anyway, the first person to ask a question today will get a prize. So let's begin. What do you guys know about cymbals and how they are made and how do they make the sounds that they make today? That's what we're going to talk about today. And basically the main purpose of, as I said before, is the autonomy of cymbals and the structures of what makes the sound of a cymbal. Of course, a cymbal is a very basic alloy and a very basic instrument, and it's been there for hundreds of years. But for you guys out there to decide what tone of quality is needed for your genre and for your job of what studio session or live applications you are doing, you need to know what it does. And there's a lot of features of a cymbal. So we can begin with the autonomy of the cymbal. There is also, again, the bell. So then you've got the profile. The profile is the depth of how the cymbal eaves down, and they also call that's the horizontal, and then there's the taper, which is going down the vertical side. So this defines a lot of characteristics of your cymbals, and this is what you should do when you're going in to buy your cymbal or looking at the sound, what qualities and what it affects, the colours of your cymbals. So, is there anyone out there who's with us today who has got any questions? Please interrupt me, because I'm doing this again for you guys out there to learn something. So, again, cymbals. Cymbals are, firstly, foremost, they were made out of, it's a bronze alloy. And a bronze alloy is made out of tin and copper. The content of which tin and copper are formed together or forged together also gives you different tonal qualities, and there's different kinds of bronze alloy. Of course, it's got tin. Tin is very expensive, and you can only get it in certain countries which are mathly driven as well. And so the prices are reflected by that, and your cymbals will fluctuate in price over the years because of the tin and copper content. And copper is also not very hard. It's very hard to get hold of. And copper, in actual fact, a tip for you guys, has got memory. So most copper, that if your cymbals do break, not to say they will break, some of them will break because the memory of the copper has been used before. So potentially the copper is recycled, and copper has a memory, and that could also be a fluctuation of your cracks in your cymbals, and that's where warranties come into play, but I'm not going to talk about that. So the way in which tin and copper are forged has also an effect on your cymbal sounds. So you've got here, most cymbals are B20, which is 20% tin and 80% copper. What kind of copper you use in your ingredients, as I said it before, introduces different tonal qualities. So again, if you're using virgin copper, you're going to get a more organic sound. Now, some people may disagree with that, but going into this, tin and copper are forged at a huge temperature and they're put together in a melting oven, and so they're forged together by melting them, and then they're basically mixed together. The mixing of metals and the mixing of tin and copper forges and solidifies in different applications. So your cymbals tend to, in actual fact, are softer or harder in certain areas. And it's so important that the cooling process of when a cymbal is baked, it's cooled down gradually, because then the forge of your bonds between the tin and copper are a lot stronger and a lot more malleable and flexible. Hence, they will last a lot longer. Now, there's also different types of ways in which you can bake your cymbals. One uses wood, other people use coal, other people use gases. Gases also have a very intense heat and a very constant heat, but wood has a lot more higher temperature in certain degrees, and it forges the metal slower. So therefore it's more malleable. But I'm not here to talk mainly about what, how and when cymbals were made, but I want to talk to you about the tonal qualities, and so you get a little bit more understanding of the ways in which you can decide what cymbal sound you want to get. Now you may be asking already, what bells, what bronze alloy, what weights, all these questions must be floating in your heads, and I want you to ask me these questions as well in the due course of this live stream. It's very difficult to interact with you guys because I'm here talking, but I would like your input. So, the alloys that we've got, and you've known, is B20. B20 tin in copper of 20%, 80%. There is higher values of cymbal manufacturers, and some cymbal manufacturers will also say that higher tin content makes the cymbal sound better. And that's why they say that there's secret alloys of silver in there. There's also copper and tin and zinc. All these things are there to use, as zinc is also used as a catalyst in the process. And regarding silver and adding silver and all these things, it's all preferences of the companies, of their marketing structure. But of course, if the tin content is higher, and say 22 to 22%, or say, that increases the malleability and the softness of a cymbal. So therefore, you will get a lot darker cymbal and a lot longer lasting cymbal. Hammering techniques also make a major difference in your cymbal sounds. And there's different types of hammering. There's also machine hammering. Most cymbals in Turkey are made by handmade, and they do begin with machine hammering to begin with. As to make a cymbal via machine is a lot less time consuming than, say, for instance, a hand hammer. But a machine also puts the same pressure on your cymbals. I don't know which camera to look at right this second. I'll look at this camera. So you don't know what a machine also puts the same amount of pressure on a cymbal all the time, as opposed to a hand-hammered cymbal. You get rebound from your hand, therefore you have more consistency. People may go, why is that more consistent? Because in some places where the alloy bonds together of the tin and copper may be softer or harder. So when you, as in the drumming, you have the rebound. In the hammer, you'll have the rebound as well, and therefore now the taper is again which camera shall we look at? That one on the side. So hopefully you can see it. Is the horizontal bow on the cymbal. Now, depending on the bow, or the taper, if it's an even taper going evenly flat, then you'll have a very fast decaying cymbal. Therefore, you will have a very short sustain, like your fast cymbals, like your AAXs, for instance. If you look at that, and I'm trying to show you, you'll get quite a flat, even taper on it, meaning that you get a very even and fast release cymbal. Again, the main aspect of a cymbal is the more less profound and more shimmering sounds you will get. A lot of companies, and you can check out on when you go next to the store, if you've got a flatness next to the bell, that also adds like a filter, so that it gets rid of unwanted overtones. And those overtones are the ones that you want to get rid of in the studio, and hence why people take their cymbals on the bottom. Now, again, I'm going to go all over shot, but bear with me. So there's the taper, there's the profile of the cymbal, and then you will have decay. And then you've got hammering techniques, deeper hammering, lighter hammering, machine hammering, that will also have an effect on your cymbal sounds. And then you've got the finishes. All these combinations, you've got endless opportunities and factors in which you can employ these techniques, and that's why there's a huge array of cymbals out there in the world today, and you may find it difficult to choose from. But hopefully this will enlighten you to help you in learning a little bit about cymbals. So, again, we've got the taper, we've got the bell, we've got the profile. Also, the profile, if it's high cymbals, so in a big deep profile, you'll get a higher pitch cymbal as well with the weight, because the weight is evenly distributed out a lower cymbal. Now, if we're going to go into the hammering techniques, there's various different kinds of hammering techniques of cymbals. There's machine, this one's machine made, so there's someone going around, so that gives a higher pitch sound on the cymbals, and sometimes gives an unwanted, you get an unwanted overtone. You can define what cymbals are mainly hammered if you hear an overtone when you crash it, and then you choke it, then you hear an overtone going up or going down evenly. If it's going down evenly, then it's most likely more hammer technique. If it goes up, then it's a machine hammer. Machine hammer does not mean that the quality is any less, however. However, the tone quality is more likely to be a higher pitched resonant sound. Now, do we have any questions so far, or nothing?
We do. The first question is, what's the difference between old cymbals and new cymbals? Is there a specific difference?
Old cymbals and new cymbals. Well, the older the cymbal, again, the metal over time gets more brittle. The more you hit it, the softer it also gets, and over time, the cymbals will get more brittle. So what will happen is that your cymbals they'll have less decay, and then they'll tend to more likely to fracture over time. But let's go into more finishes and hammering techniques. There's there's light taper hammers like this one. This cymbal has got very thin little hammering marks all the way around consistently. This is actually called a traditional cymbal, which is mainly made in the from 60s to 70s. And what that produces is a silky, even overtone and decay. Some people cannot hear this on this course or this clinic, but in here it's very different sounding. So mainly the sound references that we give today are barely scratch the surface. So you really have to come in or try the cymbals yourself to really hear the difference. So this is purely scientific, what we're talking about today, and factual. So in older cymbals, you also had, like this is an Abrased 1950s trans stamp, which is the transition stamp. And this is a 2,600 grams cymbal. The heavier the cymbal, now with weights, the heavier the cymbal, the higher pitch, the more higher pitch the cymbal would be. Older cymbals tended to be a lot heavier because it was a lot easier to make and less would technically break. And the blanks were also slightly heavier, so it was a lot more consistent that they could do it. And also, back in those days, you didn't have all the recording techniques that you have today. So cymbals did have to have a higher presence. So technically, some of the cymbals that you may hear from your greats from older periods are technically not the ones that you may feel is the right one for today, because back then they needed to have a lot more presence and cut to get through. Hence, like Tony Williams or this, cymbals are very heavy and they're very cut through, but on the recordings that you had, they sound lush. This, in fact, as you can see, is again quite a big height profile. So I'm going to get a lot of tone and a lot of sustain out of it. And what it is going to be quite a pingy ride. And this is also got lots of little hammers, so making it high pitched. And then we're going to go into different types of hammers that we've got here today. And yeah, so we're going to show you the tone qualities. So this is an old cymbal that someone said from 1950s. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it properly here with the microphones that we have, but I hope that you get some kind of idea on them. As you can hear here in this example, because of the big bow as well and the weight of the cymbal, it kind of overrides its tonal quality. So what happens is that you get a mixture and a mush of sound. So if I'm digging in higher or more, you'll get more overtones coming in, clashing together, less control. So if you want more control, then you might want to get either a lot more heavier cymbal in the bell, or a bigger bell, or a lower taper but having a thicker middle or a thicker bell. So let's look at the bell on this one. This has got quite a big protrusion coming out, so it will have a very defined sound. This has got a big bell but with a thinner quality. This is a lighter cymbal, about 200 grams lighter, and you can see, you will hear that the tonal quality of this bell is going to be a lot more displaced within the cymbal. Here, for instance, we've got a very small bell, and it's a very rounded bell. And then, so what will happen with this one, if I can take the felt off, is that you're going to have a lot darker qualities, and you're going to have a bell that you can't really use. Because it gets lost within the cymbal. Now if I go to another bell, an even smaller, flatter bell, on which one shall I go, which camera? I'll go this one, if you can see me. Again, you can hear more presence of the bow of the cymbal. Again, I can hear the rest of the cymbal. I can hear the bell. This one, because it's a thinner bell, I can hear more of a bit of both. And then this is a small bell on it's kind of a very rounded bell, very, very dark, and so forth. If I even play this bell, this is quite a big bell in consideration to the size of the cymbal. So if I play all three of the cymbals now, you will hear a massive difference in sound. So we're going to play the 1950s trans sound cymbal. I can hear more of the stick. now we're going to play a slightly thinner cymbal, but the taper is, we've got a very big bell on it, and we've got a very small taper on it. So it's going to have quite a long decay, and it's going to be a lot darker. So now we're going to go to a more of a traditional finish where this is actually Abrased Finish, which is basically using a wire wool to lay your cymbals. This is also, again, if you look at it, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a dent inside the bell. So making it, basically that's filtering the unwanted noises. So it's technically acting as a dampener to the bell going into the cymbal. It's going to be darker. Of course the finish will have an effect, but the shape will have more of a tonal effect with the bell. Let's go over to this cymbal, which is again a very heavy cymbal in consideration for it. It's a 20-inch, and the bell is very tiny and it's very flat. So what's going to happen? It's going to have a short sustain, and it's going to be it's going to be high pitched as well in consideration to the others. However, with a lot more sustain, which is shorter. So technically the stick, you will hear the stick definition very short. There's long stick definition, dark, but still a long stick definition, still a long stick definition. Here we'll hear a very short stick definition. Now, if we're going to go to deep. This is a deeper hammer cymbal now as well. This is kind of like your elite range or a lot of other products that do have. This has got very deep hammers. The deeper the hammer, the makes it the darkest tonality that it makes. This has also got quite a nice bow on it. So this one's going to have quite a very dark sound. The bell is very flat and big. So again, you're going to get a very low tonality out of the cymbal. And again, the taper is very flat here and then goes down on the edge, meaning that you're going to have a little bit more deepness, but the sound is not going to be as long sustained. So let's try and see what this is. Does this make sense to you guys, or so far? And then we've got some other questions. I'll go to the questions. Finishes, also what happens to your cymbals, because they're bronze, they oxidize over time. And the oxidization also acts as a dampener to your cymbals. So the older cymbals, going back to that comment, what does the older cymbals? The older cymbals will also have a slightly a damper sound in some aspects because they've been oxidized over time. Now, finishes, different kind of finishes has a major impact of your sound qualities, and I've tried to bring here, we've got about 500 cymbals downstairs, and I would love to take you downstairs into the vault. However, I've tried to bring up into the upstairs here with Nuno and the boys a palette of cymbals that should give you an indication of styles and sounds that make a modern, or you call it categories or colour palettes of today. Now, there's natural finishes, more of these kind of finishes, these are natural, which will make it a lot more duller, darker cymbal because they're unlathed. And the lathe, what that does technically is that if you've got a lot of dimples and a lot of deep hammering marks, what it does is soothes it out. It's like having a sandpaper going over the top to make it a little bit more silky. The way in which you play with that and the amount you take off, or take off, take on, don't take off, take on, like this, affects the tonal quality. Now, a lot of people do like the dry cymbals, and mine all have been the pioneers in the dry cymbal market, and they have made absolutely amazing cymbals to give you that kind of dark sound, which is what happened in about 8 to 10 years ago. And now a lot more people are going for silkier, sweeter sounds. Cymbals are so important to your playing because it defines who you are as a player, and that's where people can identify of how you play, and your sticks and the way you play with your sticks is basically translated through your cymbals. And so you have to find cymbals that work with you so that you can translate your artistic skills through them. And they're relatively more important in my aspects than drums. Drums have it's just a membrane stretched over, which of course has different kind of tonalities, but that's less there's less implication of your sticks going through it than I believe, on a cymbal. Now, going back to different kind of finishes, the deeper hammers make a darker sound, lighter hammers make a higher pitch sound, and machine hammers will also make a even higher pitch sound. So that's why you get some like A customs, AAXs, which also have a really high pitched quality that goes through, that cuts through to your music. Now, so with these in mind, I'm just trying to gain my thoughts, sorry. With this in mind, you can now combine the finishes and lathing techniques with your cymbals to get the qualities of sound that you want. So there's the lathe cymbals. So these are your traditional lathe cymbals, and usually you take off about 50 to 60 grams, one on each side when you're lathing, and it basically spins around at a high velocity, and then someone's going to put his life in danger by putting a metal thing in there, and then shards of metal flying off. Now, I haven't seen an accident yet, but it is quite lovely to see all these shards coming off the cymbals, and beautiful. But say for instance, this, after you've hammered it, you lathe it, then you hammer it, then lathe it. You usually do this process 3 times, and then this also allows you to get the cymbal quality of sound. A lot of other companies or cheaper brands, they might only do it once or twice, but the higher end brands, they hammer, lathe, hammer, lathe, hammer, lathe to give the cymbal the right tonality. So the reason why maybe the prices go up on cymbals is because the amount of time that is spent involved in them is a lot higher than other companies. So this is your traditional lathe cymbal, and this is a traditional cymbal, quite a nice little taper on the edge, and it bows down. And this is quite a silky sounding cymbal. And it has quite a projection as well. So, and it's got a long decay because it's got very small hammers. If you were to polish the cymbal, you will get a lot higher pitched, a lot more consistent, faster crash sound. And this is kind of like your polished cymbal. And it's also higher pitch, but a little bit duller in presence. So again, having the bell semi-polished or semi-raw also affects the cymbal, because the cymbal is technically a rougher surface. Now here we've got an Abrased Finish cymbal, which is mainly like your Byzant series. This is particularly a Murantiro series, a Mosaic, and this is, they use wire wool to get this finish, and this is technically in between a lathe and a raw cymbal. And there you get a lot more drier qualities coming out of the cymbals. So here you'll have something very dry. again, I can hear a lot more darker qualities from my stick, and the different sticks will also have a different impact on the sound. I mean, I've got here some other slightly bigger tip. Now, semi-lathe and semi-abrased is this kind of finish. And usually they go for a lot, so you need a mortgage or you need to give a kidney away for these kind of cymbals. But these cymbals have got a quality of one of the traditional and of the darkness, so you'll be able to get more darker qualities with a lot more control and a bit of both worlds. I hope you can hear that. And if you can hear the decay as well, very even. A lot more trashier with the abrased. Let's go to technically a lathe finish that over time has oxidized and technically has become slightly polished in itself. Very sweet sound. And then you've got completely polished with some little bit of deep hammering. So I'm going to get something out as well so you can hear. I've got a Turk cymbal made by Istanbul Mehmet here, who also make great cymbals. One thing for sure is that all the companies out there make good cymbals, and they can't. Some just don't spend more time with their manufacturing, some don't, but there's always something that for someone they may like. And I do rate all the Turkish companies, because you can't really lie with cymbal manufacturing. Again, this almost sounds like a flat ride. I mean, look at the taper and the bell, it's almost flat. Therefore, you're going to get a lot more stick definition coming out as well. But the bell, as we've got a small bell, we will not get much presence out of the bell on this one. But this is hand hammered, marks quite big hammering and all the way round. So you get more darker quality on this. This is kind of your natural cymbal. And these are actually quite hard to make because the blanks have to be correct from day one, because you're not lathing the blanks in any way. You're technically like rolling out a smaller cymbal to this shape, and the hammering is what makes the colour and makes the tonal, makes it smoother over time. These are actually quite hard to make because a lot of them do crack in the process because they are rather brittle to begin with. The other thing about cymbals, just a quick note, when you cool cymbals down in the factory, most people use seawater as opposed to salt water, as opposed to normal water, because the boiling temperature of seawater, because it's got salt, is higher. So that means that the cymbal is cooled down slower on the cymbal, so the bond is more strong between them. And that's the main importance in a cymbal, is the fundamental ingredients of how it is made to begin with. So going through cymbals, let's ask some questions out there, because I might be able to answer your questions and give you more insights if you give me questions. So do we have any questions?
Yes, we have one from Charlie Smith.
Charlie Smith.
Yeah, so what is the opinion on cymbal bell size and the sonic effect it has?
Well, the bigger the bell, in terms of height, in terms of size, it's gonna, of course, it's gonna have a bigger, profound sound. So again, if we go back to these, we got three lined up. Actually, we've got three perfect examples here. One here has got a 1950s, which have quite a high profile, thicker bell. The thicker the metal on the bell, the more pronounced the bell is going to be in the whole cymbal, and the more pronounced you'll be able to get an attack. The lower the bell, this is a very low bell. This is actually like a Constantinople bell from back in the day, and it's quite a big low bell. You'll have a darker quality, a darker tone, and the smaller the bell, basically, if it's a rounded bell, again, you'll get basically a lesser tone and more of the wash in the cymbal coming through. So let's look at that. Does that make sense to you, Charlie? We're waiting for the golden answer.
Great.
Charlie? Okay, no. Okay, so let's play the question. So here is a 1950s bell. This is quite a pronounced, quite heavy bell. This is a lot lower profile, wider bell. So I can hear more of the cymbal in it. And this is an even smaller bell that's quite flat. And let's hear it, but unlaid. Sometimes smaller the bell, and the thicker, also the more higher pitched it can be, like this one. Got a higher pitch. Next question.
There was one question if you can show a hand-hammered cymbal. I think you've probably covered that. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to hand-hammered cymbals.
Hand-hammered cymbals. Well, most cymbals today, just to let you know, I bet I'll get criticised for this, but 90% of cymbals are mainly a machine made out there, and then the last 10 to 20, 30% are going to be hand-hammered. The real hand-hammered cymbals have a real dark tonality to them, and you will not hear a overtone coming through when, say for instance, when you choke the cymbal. So say for instance, if I'm going to choke a couple of cymbals, and you may or may not hear, well, we'll be able to hear it in here, but you might not in the digital world hear it. Again, the cymbal goes down. If it goes evenly decayed down, then it's mainly more hand-hammered qualities in there. Can you hear that? Did you guys hear that? Oh, put that out. So it dies down. The bell. I hope that helps you identify those. Now regarding weights as well, weights, the thinner the weight, the darker the tone is going to be, and the thicker the weight, the thicker the cymbal, the more higher pitched it will likely to have. So that will also have an effect on your cymbals. The most hardest instruments to kind of identify the sounds with are rides and bigger cymbals. And lower cymbals, which they've identified as crashes. Back in the day, there were no crashes, no ride, they were just cymbals, and they were just different sizes. Now in hi-hats, you got again the same qualities of this kind of method or this kind of scientific way, you can identify on hi-hats. However, what they play with hi-hats is the weights on the top and the bottom. So the more bite, and if you want more bite, you will have a heavier bottom. If you wanted a lot softer, you'll have a lighter bottom. And the washiness is also sorted by the way in which the taper hits together. If you have a bigger bow, you'll get more of a warpy sound coming through, like these ones here, these A's will have. Oh, I've got to get these off, sorry. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's quite a bassy sound coming off these cymbals in here. And say, for instance, if you've got flatter sounding with dark, you've got these legacies here, which will be a lot more. Again, I'll take these off, sorry. It's got less. There'll be a lot darker tonality as, say, for instance, these. A lot sharper because it's a sharper, basically the profile of the cymbals are a lot sharper coming together. So you've got more air trapped inside, the more air going to be trapped inside, as opposed to these cymbals, they're going to let out the air more evenly. So, well, how are we doing for time so far?
Well, we're 45 minutes in.
We're 45 minutes in. Oh dear. Okay, and we still haven't got to the shells. So, any more questions about cymbals on that aspect?
No.
No? Do you guys want to know about? Yes.
Someone's asking about the big bass drum behind you.
Oh yeah, this bass drum. This is from in the mid 1920s, and it was a Traps drum kit. We've got a lot of these kind of kits here, so do come in. It's kind of like a museum. But this is what there was, the drum kits in the day of the dance bands in 1920. It's as is one owner from new drum kit, and this is how they would be playing back then. And it's a Traps kit in the sense that they rolled it off and on stage. And these have got 1906 Zildjians on there, and between 1906 and 1920 year of making cymbals. And they had a lowboy as well. There's a lowboy hi-hat stand down there, which is really great. Come and check it out. It's very unique. It's made by Premier, and it's a Premier Olympic from the 1920s. So going on to shells, we've got a whole array of shells that we've got in here in Rubix, and the high there. And then we've basically taken off the heads of these drums, and I want to show you a little bit about shells. I hope the cymbal aspect of things did help a little bit, and there are some nice things. Paisley's actually got a really nice section on their website about how the cymbal sounds are affected, but you've got to use your ears mainly to define what you want. So I've got now, is that camera on these shells? So we'll keep on that camera for now. Of course, there are different shell types and there's different materials of wood, different materials of bearing edges, different material of the way the laminates are made, the cross laminate, vertical laminate, horizontal laminate. So that's a horizontal, then you've got vertical. The Sonar make vertical laminates, and the reason why there's different types of, basically it goes down to the more tension you have in a shell, the higher pitch, the more higher pitched it is. The lower tension of a shell, the more lower pitch there's going to be. By that, what I mean is by literally the fibrous structure of a wood. So if you have a shell, so you've got horizontal grain and you've got vertical grain. Now, horizontal grain is a lot more stronger because you've got the grains against it. So it will basically, if I had a grain in my hand, like a flat grain, it will stay mostly flat in my hand. If I had a vertical grain drum, it will just fall to the floor on both edges. and that's because of the structure, the cellulose structure of the wood. Now, if you had, so technically a vertical grain drum will have a lower pitched orientation because there's less tension in the wood as opposed to a horizontal. Now you get diagonal wood as well, which is a bit diagonal cross cut. The diagonal, and that's the way they get these kind of cuts, the horizontal and the vertical, is the way that they cut the tree down. Like bird's eye maple, if any of you got bird's eye maple out there, you are really not a tree hugger. But all of us drummers aren't tree huggers because we're cutting down trees. But someone who's cutting down for a bird's eye maple tree, technically what they do to get the grain is they cut the tree down at 45 degrees, and so you got less, basically you got more waste of the wood as opposed to the others. But a diagonal grain is basically in between a horizontal and a vertical, so you get the tonal qualities, you get the structural tension, but also get the lower fundamental tones out of it. Now, back in the day, Sonor is a company, and we've got quite a lot of drums here. Sonor is a company that made drums vertically a lot, and so they have got a very low pitched tonal quality to them. Now, the one who is intuitive in this to play with these is DW. Likes to play with these kind of combinations of the way in which they cross laminate. A lot of companies do cross lamination because technically it's also a stronger way of making the drums. The reason why we made ply drums to begin with in the world is not because that's the best way of making the drums. It's the easiest way of making the drums because it's basically very thin plies that you just can make round and then glue together. And it's also structurally more stronger, and it's a carpentry kind of skill. There's not really much to it in terms of drum manufacturing, really, in the physical aspect. But so you get horizontal grain and vertical grain, and this is the way in which you can play with the tonal qualities of the wood. So next time you look into it, if you want a lower fundamental sound, not fundamental, that's wrong actually, because it's not fundamental, is a resonance point, and this doesn't really have a resonance point of that. Everything has a resonance point, but that's the wrong word to use. But to have a lower pitch, you want to have either vertical grain wood structure. But the most vertical grain wood structures also have reinforcement rings at the top, because technically the reinforcement rings are there to hold the drum round. And there are reinforcement on drums, and that also has an effect on the sound. Because technically what you're doing is putting a plastic head or a calf head back in the day that is in touch with the wood of the shell. And depending on how much the head is touching the side or the wood on the shell has an effect on the sound, and that will have either, if you've got more contact, you'll have a lot more fundamental lower pitch, less, it will be less resonant, not to say it will be less sensitive, but technically it will be a lot more harder to tune, and it will have a lot more thuddier sounds, as opposed to something with a really sharp edge, basically meaning that the head will be on a lot more less contact, meaning that you will have a lot more tones coming out of the drum. Now, going into this about what kind of woods, there are a lot of different kinds of woods, and let's go back to this picture here. I've got here, by the way, this is a modern pearl. This is a maple shell. We've got here a Canopus maple with reinforcement. And I'll tell you why I've chosen these. This is absolutely the Bugatti of drums. And if you want to try some, you can come here. This is a 1940s Slingland Radio King, which is quite rare to see. This is a 70s. This is actually apparently one of the shells that Vinnie Colaiuta used on a hire on a Frank Zappa recording. And this is a Ludwig from the early 70s. And all of them have different tonal qualities because the woods are, and the combination of different kind of woods make it have a different tone. So if we go into the woods of the drums, and let's see if you just go across to showing the different kinds of woods. So woods, the thickness of the shell also has an effect on the sound, but we'll take that in bit by bit. But plywood, this is what it is, has a long, there's different methods of making drums. Of course, I'm going to go very quick. There's plywood, stave drums, which is made in blocks. You've got the solid steam bent, which is one piece of wood, and you've got segmented, which is also like block. Segmented is like using a brickwork, and I can show you some drums of those. But plywood, which these are, is a long sustain with plenty of volume and varying fundamental pitches because of the different types of wood there are. But stave drums have shorter sustain, higher fundamental pitch. Steam bents have a variant of a long sustain with a lower pitch, and solid drums have a long sustain with higher pitch. And we'll show you some of those if we have time. But going into the wood aspect of the wood types into very basic qualities, maple is a very even amount of high and mids and slightly warm lows, and very good for all-purpose drums, which is this kind of shell. The reason why we use maple, most drums are made out of maple, because it's one of the most readily available plywoods out there, and that's what people have used for the last century. Now, birch is a lot more of a higher frequency, and it has less mid-range and has a good low end. So that's why it's technically like having a filtered maple drum. So that's why they use it very highly for recording sessions. Now, mahogany is a very now a seldom wood and very expensive wood. And say, for instance, this is maple. This is also maple, but the reason I bring this up, I'll tell you. This is mahogany, lighter mahogany, and this is maple, and this is maple, poplar, maple combination from Ludwig. Now, this is the most basically readily available combinations that there are out there. But mahogany is kind of a muted, mutes the highs. It's got a smooth mid-range with warm and rich low end, and it's vibrant and resonant at the same time. Now, let's just go into walnut. Walnut is also an equal amount of high, mids and lows, and big and warm, so it's very similar. It's about the way in which the woods grow and how quickly they grow. Back in the day when they said, why is Stradivarius so freaking amazing in terms of violin manufacturing, and people, scientists and everyone was saying, why is Stradivarius violin so amazing and why are they so expensive? And the reason why Stradivarius is so so expensive and they were so good is because back when Stradivarius was making the wood, or cutting down the wood, and the woods that they were cut down, there was a big freeze and a cold spell in the whole of Europe at that time. So what that meant is the trees were actually growing slower, meaning that the grains were closer together, meaning that the wood has got a more better structural capacity, and technically the woods therefore are more vibrant and a lot more resonant because it's got a lot more time to grow. And that's why mainly Stradivarius sounded better than other violins. So let's go back into the drum section of the things. And then so we've got walnut, okay, oak. I don't have oak here, I do have oak drums here. And we don't have time to show you everything, but you should come here and then we can play with them. Anyone's more than welcome to come here and play with every single drum that we have, within reason. Now, okay, oak is softer on the highs, a good all-round with mid-range and slightly warmer lower tones. So it's really good for an all-purpose kind of fatty sound. Now, beech, which is what was very readily available in Germany, and the Sonors were very good at making beech drums. They were very pronounced high frequencies and a lot of mids with good low-end punch, and very sensitive because they were really soft. Now I can go into Bubinga and all the other woods. Bubinga is basically a rosewood, a glorious name for a rosewood, and it's even amount of highs and mids and very rich in low end, and it's also sensitive and punchy. Now Poplar is what people used in the vintage drums a lot in the middle ground, because A, it was a very soft wood and it was a very readily available wood and very easy to work with, and therefore there was quite a thick ply in the middle of old vintage drums. And there was Poplar because it's got soft high and it's got a boost of the mids and lower ends, so it's very smooth. Ash, in my eyes, is one of the most resonant woods out there. Scientifically, it is actually the most resonant wood, and so you're going to get a lot more overall sounds with ash wood. Now, I'm not going to go into exotic woods because that's really bad for the environment, but all you guys who've got exotic drums out there, you are lucky, because in many years to come we shall not be able to get them. Of course, I'm going to metal drums, but I want to touch now with the bearing edges of these drums, and that's why we've taken off these drum heads for you. There's various types of bearing edges. So there's if we go to, you can, I'll try and show it with my hands in sign language. You can put the camera on me and I could talk further. I hope you guys are finding this interesting, by the way, because this is the first time I'm doing this kind of live feed. And this is a lengthy Joe Wicks drum course. So again, going into bearing edges, the bearing edges have a major effect on the way in which drums have the sound. Of course, the more contact, the more low pitched, and the more fundamental, or the wrong word, sorry, the more lower pitched volume you shall get out of the drum, and the more contact. So there's various types. So there's the 45 degree, which is very the modern kind of angle. There's the 45, I'm going to quickly go and we're going to go show you the drums. So it's 45 degree angle drums, very sharp, so you'll have a lot more sustain and a lot more focused sound, you'll have a lot more basically sensitivity of the drum. Then you've got some people like the timpani effect, they've got the 245 degree, which is very rare to find nowadays, but basically it's like a 245 degrees. Then you're basically moving the contact of the shell on the head further in. So you're going to have like the timpani effect, where the drum, technically those drums are slightly undersized, and what happens is you get a timpani effect, you get more pull on the head, making it a lot more sensitive and a lot more longer overtones on the drum. Now you've got 30 degree edges, which Gretsch were really notorious for in the 70s and 60s. And what that means is, again, you've got more contact with the head, and what that in actual fact means that you will get a lot more lower body out of the drums. And there's also roundovers, so they have a slight roundover on the outside. Now, a company that is extra special in bearing edges, and I could talk hours of that, is Canopus. Canopus is a company that has spent years on playing with bearing edges, and hence why the cost of their drums are so high. But they have every drum and every bearing edge on the outside and on the inside is different, so that they maximize the perfect resonance of each drum. So the roundover as well on the sides, which we'll show you, also has a more lower fundamental tone. So let's go to the shells and we'll go through this. So here we got this, I'm going to try and show you. This is a 45 degree. angle. It doesn't really have much of a round over the side. So this is your kind of like your standard today that most companies do. And what this is that you get it's very basically a focused, and you get a lot more you'll be able to do a lot more tuning abilities and evenness with this, as it's of the amount of contact between the head and the shell is a lot smaller, so you get a lot more resonance. Now here we go to a Canopus one. This is also a 45 with a round over on the edge, slight round over, and it's got a re-ring inside, so technically you've got more wood contact, therefore the resonance of the wood will come through a lot more than this pearl, so you will have a lot more woodier sound coming out of this drum. And these both drums are made out of the same material, and so and in the same area of the world, so you will get a lot more presence out of, and a lot more tunability out of these drums. Now if you go down to, we're going to go straight to 1940, where the techniques weren't that amazing, but they made amazing drums because it's still here today. And basically this is a total round over kind of edge. So what you'll have is a very not the word fundamental, but a very low tone out of the drum. And this is a mahogany, poplar mahogany shell. So with the combination of the mahogany and the poplar and the mahogany on the outer side, you're going to get a very low tone out of this drum. And even if I tap it, and then I'm going to tap a 30-degree 6-ply Jasper shell from 1970. I mean, this one sounds amazing. But this 30-degree round over, this is a 30-degree edge, so you get, but it's a very thin plies. So, and this is maple, you will get a kind of like, this was their standard back then for their modern kind of sound. And the 30-degree gives you more bottom end out of the drum. Now this is a Ludwig. Also, this is now a maple, poplar maple combination. And this one is basically a 45 with a round over the side. And it's completely uneven. Now the evenness of the drums and the way they're made, they're so important to the tuning. And if you've got uneven drums, they may sound great, but your tunability on them will be limited, and you will find that some heads will work, some heads won't. Let's not even get into the heads and the thicknesses of heads, because we'll be here till tomorrow, and I shall start a war on Facebook and Instagram and ICMP, and with the companies as well. But let's not go into that right now. And if you hit that, so you've got the tonal qualities of the highs, which is of the maple, and you've got the poplar, which is low. Of course, everything's rattling, but it's got the best of both worlds. So this is kind of a really great drum for kind of your rocky sound. This is really great for your kind of country sound, and all these aspects affect your day-to-day of what you're drum recording. All these drums, by the way, you can take and hire them and try them out, or come here and see them. Now I'm going to show you a couple of really special drums, and I'm going to bring them over. So this is a Zelkova wood, 200-year-old wood made by Canopus, and if you look at this bearing edge, this is not even a 60, this is a completely almost an Everest edge, you know, almost vertical. And this is basically making a very sharp sound, and this is made out of one single ply wood, and or not one ply, this is one hollowed out piece of wood, and therefore you're going to get a lot more basically tonal qualities out of this drum, and tunabilities as well as a low, because it's relatively thick. Now, again, the shells and the way in which shells are made and put together and glued together, and the thicknesses also have a huge integral part of the sound of the drums. So if I go into the thicknesses of the drums for you for a second, just to recap, so there's a 45-degree angle, you've got the tube, so the bearing edges, you've got 45, and then exterior we've got nothing. You've got the double bearing edge, which is a 45 on both sides. You've got a round over, which is a 45 with a rounded top. You've got complete baseball bat, which is your vintage sound, which is very warm, the rounded edge. And you've got 30-degree edges, and then you've got all the obscure edges that new companies make. Now, in terms of thickness, which we're going to go into, the thicker the wood, of course, the more plies you have, the more higher pitched it's going to be. The thinner the wood, the more lower pitch you're going to have. So therefore, a lot of older drums were very thin. They were very thinly made because they wanted to skimp on costs, but also because everyone wants to skimp on costs, as we know, like all of us do. But what I want to say is that the older drums were very thin, and they had re-rings in them to keep them round, because also the wood glues that they were using back then didn't last, and they dried out, so that the re-rings helped them to stay round, because if the drums aren't round, they will not tune as easily. Now, there's a lot of other things that we can go into, snare beds and also on snares, and there's a lot of other aspects of the drums that we can go into, but I don't want to bore you completely, and I would like you to still be interested in drums and not get away from drumming in its entirety. Are there any questions?
There are some thank yous, very informative.
Who said that? Who said that? Because whoever said that has won this Aruga. This Rivet Aruga. Whoever said that, wait, which camera? That camera?
Yeah, that camera, we're going with that one.
This one?
Yeah.
Who's ever said that has won one of these. These are great products made by Aruga.
Great. So Marty, this one is for you.
So Marty, this is going to you. Please message us at Rubix, and we'll send this out to you with another gift on the side of it as well. Any other questions? Any questions? No questions? Questions?
Not that I can see.
No?
Someone said they preferred the 60s Silgen cymbals.
Okay.
Charlie Smith.
Charlie Smith, of course. Charlie. Yes. Well, Charlie, you've had an impact. We'll get that sent out to you. No, but thank you for your time. And again, which camera am I looking at? Or is that a question? Another question? Okay. What I want to do is basically thank ICMP again for having us today, and I thank you for your time. And seriously, if you have any questions, please do come in and feel free, make this your home, because I can talk hours about instruments and also have discussions about them, and I would love to have discussions and also talk to yourselves and the team here as well. The team here and everyone that works here has got the same knowledge, and they're all the same people as yourselves. They are working musicians, and our main goal here is to educate. And if you come in here and if you go out with more educated than you come in, that for us is a bonus. So please do come and visit us anytime, and also ask ICMP staff, because they're doing a fantastic job. And I hope this was a little informative, and then if you want to come in and try these drums, do come in. We are doing courses later in the year about all the aspects of the drums, and then recording these drums, and also how to recreate those sounds, because there's also, I haven't gone into synthetic drums, metal drums. Of course, brass is warm, and that's why people use it. And the more brittle the metal, the more high pitch it's going to be. But we're here, and this facility is built for you to come in and feel like that you can be a part of this community. And on behalf of Rubix and the team at Rubix and ICMP, we thank you for your time tonight, and then keep in touch and see you soon. And we'll send this to the lucky winner, and also to Charlie Smith. So take care.